Hi, folks. Welcome to the Scrum, Politico's weekly podcast. I'm James Hohmann in the Politico newsroom with congressional editor Rachel Van Dongen and deputy energy and transportation editor Matt Daly. The topics this week: New Jersey Governor Chris Christie's bridge controversy and the epic 2-hour-plus press conference, the unemployment benefit extension vote in the Senate, and the polar vortex. To kick it off, let's get your headlines for the week. Rachel?
I think we all have to talk about that Christie press conference that just ended after 2 hours. That was a long press conference. I think we all are wondering what might happen if Christie runs for president in 2016. If we're all going to be sitting through those lengthy press conferences again. So my major takeaway from the press conference was that Christie, at least in the beginning, I have to admit that I didn't really sit through the whole thing, basically did what he needed to do. He apologized. He said he was embarrassed, that he was humiliated by the abject stupidity of the emails sent by his top aides in regards to the bridge closures. He said that he fired his deputy chief of staff, who was also a close friend, and he also let go the head of his political operation. And he said those folks lied to him personally about this episode, and that the behavior was just intolerable. So I think most folks around the country are going to think that he did what he needed to do if no evidence emerges that he had anything to do with this personally.
Yeah. Well, your headline?
I think the collection of Gates headlines around his forthcoming book, I think it came in at a nice time. It follows in the long tradition of the tell-all book.
The Washington memoir.
Exactly. Yeah. We love it. It's full of juicy details, and they're leaking out slowly. So that should be one that keeps us entertained on the talk show circuit for a while.
Yeah, and it really is amazing, the bookends of 2 days and this first week back of 2014, something potentially really damaging for Hillary Clinton's 2016 aspirations and really damaging for Chris Christie. With the Christie press conference, I remember wasn't alive for it, but the Geraldine Ferraro press conference in 1984, when something very similar was swirling around during the 1984 presidential campaign. Walter Mondale had picked her, New York congresswoman, as her running mate. Lots of questions about her husband's business dealings, various write-offs, and she had a 2+ hour press conference very similar to this. Take every question, just wait it out. And it's the beginning of a process to try and get past this story. And as Christie noted during his press conference today, he hasn't even been inaugurated yet for his second term. But these investigations by a hostile Democratic state legislature, the U.S. attorney looking into it, means that we're going to be talking about this for much longer than we'll be talking about any revelations in Bob Gates's memoir.
Well, it depends. I mean, Christie was definitely doing what he could to sort of get some damage control here today by getting rid of the people who did the wrongdoing here. Getting rid of the guy who was in charge of his political operation certainly was an effort by Christie to stanch any bleeding in the future should this guy be attached to his political operation if Christie takes steps to run for president. And, it just depends. I mean, Christie went pretty far out on a limb today, I thought, in saying this scandal has nothing to do with me personally. So if any evidence at all emerges to suggest that he personally had his hands in this, I mean, he's going to be in a lot of trouble.
And these are really two senior people. It's hard to overstate. Bill Stepien is his guy, and he's the guy that Christie put in at the Republican Governors Association when he took over as chairman. And they both know a lot. On a lot of things that could be really damaging to him. And so if they take the fall and go quietly, that's one thing. And if they don't, they could hurt him in a lot of various ways. And that's why it was notable that Christie said he didn't speak to either of them when the Bergen Record story broke and fired them not directly. He, in some ways, was thinking more like a lawyer than a politician.
Well, I think that question of whether there's another shoe to drop is really going to be crucial, and I'm sure there are journalists up and down the Eastern Seaboard, many of them in this newsroom as well, working on that. But I think the real question here as well is this is one of Christie's first big national public media issues, and how he portrays himself, how he comes across, whether or not he convinces his donors that he's really the horse to back in the upcoming election. This is a real sort of crucial test. Can he get past this? Because everyone knows that in a presidential contest, this is the kind of thing he'll be dealing with on a daily basis.
Live by the New York media market, die by the New York media market. To your point about, I think we'll all just are so obsessed with him, and the Morning Joe crowd, the New York people, are so obsessed because it's a local story for them, and that has made Chris Christie, but it also has made this feeding frenzy that much worse.
Right. I mean, we have to remember here that we were talking around the TV when we were watching this earlier, and we were discussing the fact that to sort of the people that the national media that follows Christie on a daily basis, and even the New Jersey press corps, that they might be a little more cynical about the way that Christie came across, and that what kind of environment had he fostered in the state that allowed these aides to behave this way, and may listen to more of the press conference and catch some of the more off-key notes, but also that the headlines that would come across in the newspapers and on the national news in the first 5 minutes of the speech were that he took responsibility, he's embarrassed, he's sorry, and he fired these 2 aides. And that may be more than enough for a national audience to clean this up and move on.
Especially for Republicans who want to
right.
like him.
I mean, that played into his image of sort of a tough-talking, he means business kind of guy. And, he saw this wrongdoing. He fired the people responsible, and he takes responsibility for their actions. And what more can he be expected to do?
Yeah. Let's transition. Congress back in session this week. It's a big deal for you, Rachel, because you run our Congress coverage. And it started off on a high note with Congress actually passing something, or the Senate passing something, not Congress, I should add.
Right.
They moved forward, though.
Right.
They passed a key procedural hurdle
right.
for a 3-month extension of expired unemployment benefits. Can you talk about a little bit of what that means in reality and what the next steps are in this
right.
broader fight?
Right. What the Senate did was allow debate on a bill that would extend unemployment benefits for 3 months, as you point out. 6 Republicans sided with Democrats on this measure, but it has not passed. And the only reason that several of those Republicans voted with Democrats is because they're hoping to find an offset for the large cost. $6.5 billion is the cost of the bill. And so far, they haven't been able to find that offset. So several of those Republicans, including Dan Coats of Indiana and Rob Portman of Ohio, have said that they're not planning to back the bill if they can't find a way to pay for it. So there's no guarantee at all that this bill is going to pass the Senate, let alone the House.
Wow. Anything on your radar in terms of what Congress is taking up in January that affects kind of our pro subscribers, the people who really are in the care in the weeds? In
the energy world right now, the big issue seems to be whether or not our new energy abundance is going to actually lead to a lifting of the 1975 ban on oil exports. We were producing more oil than we have since the early 70s. Prices have been relatively stable, although they're at much higher levels than historic. But there seems to be a push from the industry that they want to get rid of this ban. They want to be able to sell some oil overseas. Now, politically, this seems like a little bit of a non-starter, although we had Alaskan Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski this week say she wants Obama to take steps to overturn this, which is interesting since it was actually a law passed by Congress, and she's asking the president to now take action on it. Because Congress isn't going to do anything. The Senate's not going to put anything out there since 65% of the population doesn't support the idea of the U.S. exporting its new bounty of oil. But these issues around exports and what that's done to the export deficits have really started to get some weight among the players.
Something to pay attention to. And of course, we've got to discuss the polar vortex. If you're not in, I guess, half the country that got hit by this, you don't understand just how cold it was. Extreme cold temperatures hit most of the country. What are climate scientists saying about this extreme weather and climate change in general? I saw that there were some speeches on the floor about this.
Yeah, everyone loves to chatter about the weather a little bit, and everybody loves to take the latest data point and use it to prove their point and disprove their opponents. And so cold weather, of course, creates a wave of comments about, where's our global warming? It's, we're below zero. How can we possibly be seeing any global warming? Climatologists, of course, say, weather is not climate. The temperature outside does not indicate what's going on in the broader global climate, and any specific incident it's really hard to track back to any change in the climate. Of course, that did not stop people from taking to, say, the Senate floor or making comments, snide comments about it. James Inhofe, who has literally written a book calling climate change a hoax, took to the floor to highlight several incidents, climate rallies that had been disrupted by snow, things like that. He also famously once built an igloo near the Capitol, calling it Al Gore's new home.
Well, when I came to Politico, one of the reasons I left my previous employer, a metropolitan newspaper, was that I would never have to write a weather story again.
The bane of journalism.
And we had a couple this week on our site. So, and it's time for our highlights round. We're going to touch on two big moments from the week and get your takes. Here we go. Rachel, Liz Cheney drops out of the Wyoming Senate race, giving Mike Enzi a free pass. What was the straw that broke the camel's back? Did you see this coming? And what's next for her?
I personally did not see this coming. It seemed like she was committed to this to the end, but the official explanation was that there was some family health issues, but clearly the campaign was not going well. So it certainly gave her a graceful exit. I'm sure this is not the last we've seen of Liz Cheney. She seems committed to running for some kind of public office, and I know a House seat in Wyoming is already being talked about.
2018.
Right.
Dennis Rodman in North Korea. Just a crazy guy or doing some real damage?
He loves the spotlight, doesn't he? Whether or not he's doing any damage, how
to himself.
What damage could be done in the U.S.-North Korea relationship? I mean, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, of course, but this seems more like whether or not it's ping pong diplomacy or whether or not it's just a way for the North Korean leader to make it look like he's got an actual human spirit somewhere in him. There's no telling. I think it's more of a sideshow than anything else. It's certainly ruffled a lot of feathers, and Dennis Rodman has made a career of doing that, of course.
True. Time for some shout-outs. Real quick, was there something fun or good that you read this week that you would recommend, or someone that you were impressed by? Rachel?
I can't remember the guy's name nor the name of the guy who wrote the article, but it was on the cover of the New York Times Magazine this past weekend. I don't know if either of you caught it.
The Maine
Yes,
fisherman?
that was a crazy story. I really enjoyed it. It was a story about how Maine fishermen fell overboard in the Atlantic and survived at least 12 or 16 hours or something like that by using his boots as flotation devices. So I would recommend that. It's not a typical political read, but I loved it.
Well, I tend to get into the wonky economic stuff actually when I'm in my free time. Very exciting stuff, I know. I've been noticing that even as we have our war on inequality and what's going on with the unemployment benefits and whether or not we're talking about a minimum wage increase, we're also seeing unemployment dropping rapidly, very rapidly. This is going to take the wind out of the sails of this argument, I think. I think it's going to be a big thing for Democrats, whether or not they can really keep that argument going through the year as we get towards the election day. And I think that as the economy improves and does better, look at what the Fed's been doing.
But that also really helps Democrats in 2014. It makes it harder to throw some of these incumbents out.
Absolutely. Everyone feels a little better about their situation, but it takes away their argument, but actually people are a little bit, less inclined to go to the polls and throw the bums out, right?
Absolutely. My shout out is to a new restaurant called Rose's Luxury. It opened 1 or 2 months ago on Barracks Row. All the buzz on the Hill about it, lots of members talking about it. Got a really good review in Garden and Gun magazine out of Charleston, South Carolina.
But have you eaten there?
Not yet.
Oh, all right.
So it's a risky shout out. But I was on the Hill this morning and a bunch of people were telling me about it. So
all right.
Anyway, thank you guys for coming on. Rachel and Matt, if you want even more, you can find us at politico.com/podcast. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. I'm James Hohmann. Thanks for listening.